Well, the first commercialization of the video games in Italy happens in 79, maybe late 78. I remember a beautiful video game called Less Safety for Alpha. And at the beginning, those who have a long memory like me probably remember Pac-Man. Pac-Man is the archaeology of the video game. Then comes Less Safety for Alpha, then a lot of other machines, video game machines. In 79, maybe, or 80, I asked to some people, and nobody could answer me precisely, so who knows? But let's say in 79, Chang Chung Chao, Wang Wen Yan, and Yao Wen Wan, the Gang of Four, have been went on trial in the Beijing process. It was the end of the Cultural Revolution. Well, the end of the Cultural Revolution has already happened 3 years before, in September 1976, when Chairman Mao Zedong went to the sky, and in the year 79, maybe, the Gang of Four is under trial. I was living in Bologna in that period, and I went to a place, a store, where a guy called Giuseppe Zaccaria was proposing the first video games, the first Italian video games. And I told him I want to organize a theater piece, a performance. And can you give me 4 machines, 4 video games? And he gave me the machine for free. It was a form of promotion, of course, for him. And so I could, I wrote a piece, of course, and like Canton, and I performed with 3 friends of mine, Claudia, Camilla, and Giampiero. We performed in a place called the Public Secret, and the performance was titled Game Over, with no interrogation mark. Game Over. And it was about the Beijing trial. Me and 3 other friends were the Beijing trial characters playing, fighting against the machine and losing, of course, because you know very well that the machine always wins. The machine has been built in order to win. The machine has been built by the human race, which is self-destined to lose. That's important, you know. Some engineer, some crazy engineer has created this machine which always stops at a certain point, saying game over. The game was over for me because I was coming from an experience of intense social emotionality, of intense social change, and also of intense social transformation. Freedom and equality were words meaning something, because these were words linked to millions of people marching in the streets of the world, from Shanghai to Torino, from Buenos Aires to Paris, from Prague to London, with different prospects in their heads, with different expectations, with different enemies, but with the same vague but strong perception of solidarity. Solidarity is the key word if you want to understand what has happened in that decade, in those 2 decades. Not the goal, not the ideal, not these the programs, but not the future, but the present reality of being together, the present reality of being strong because being together. The game over was well received by my friends, and I was invited to go in many strange places like Zurich, Varese, Salerno, to repeat the performance about the Beijing trial. But, well, the machine was winning. This was the central concept I was trying to transfer to my friends. Beware. Now the machine is coming, and the machine will win. It's already winning. Don't you see? Don't you see how the world is changing? And don't you see that it's changing so badly in such an aggressive, disgusting direction? Margaret Thatcher, this anticipation of Angela Merkel, had just taken power in the United Kingdom. And this was a clear announcement of a deep transformation in our life, sooner or later. Games. I want to talk about games. And you know that games are different. You use the same, you can use, if you want, the same expression in order to talk about chess and about love. And chess and love have many things in common, but something is so different that they are 2 different kinds of games. But what is the difference exactly between chess and love? I will say that if you take the horse, you know chess, everybody knows chess. Not everybody, but many people know chess, and also many people know love. And you know that if you take the horse and you displace the horse this way, that's no more a problem. You are not playing games. The horse has to do 1, 2, 3. Otherwise, as Viktor Klosky reminds, if you do differently, you are out. It's a different game. It's no more that game. You know that in love you have rules. But the general rule, the most important rule in love is that there is no rule saying that you cannot transgress rules. And more, in love, the really interesting thing is transgressing rules. So continuously reinventing the game. Someone can define this difference as the difference between finite games and infinite games. The human history, of course, the politics, social struggle, social transformation is an infinite game. And this is important for me. This is important for me personally, because I have the feeling that the game is over. But I also tell to myself, take it easy. It's over for you. But you don't know how the rules are going to change more. You don't know how the rules are going to be changed by those people who are coming after you. So this is why every time I take a train or a flight to come to Berlin or to go to Beirut or somewhere to talk with people, or in the cafe close to my house, I go out and I go to speak with people. I say to myself, well, better I stay home and I don't go depressing people here and there. Then I decide that I prefer to go because it's better for me. I stop being depressed when I talk with people. And I also have invented a new form of psychopathology, which is called simultaneous bipolarism, in the sense that I am simultaneously euphoric and depressed, and I think this is the good methodology if you want to understand and if you want to live. So, the West. It's the title of some. What is the West? What used to be the West? And I will come back to Game Over, don't worry. So what used to be the West? I would say that the concept of West is inextricably linked to the concept of future. Future and West, in a certain sense, are the same. And if I go back with my mind to the Mayflower ship, to that group of puritanical people who left the European land in order to go to colonize a newfound land, I think that they are, in a sense, inventing the modern concept of future. What are they doing? First of all, who are those guys called normally Puritans? Puritans what? What do they mean? What is the purity they are talking about? What they did want to be pure from? And I would say they want to be pure, purified from the past, from the religious, political, ethnical legacy of the European history. That's important if we want to understand the difficulty of modernity and the easiness. In a sense, forgive my imprecision, the easiness of the American relation with the future. The American Revolution has not passed. Well, stop a second. The past was there. Millions of people with red skin, they say, living there and inhabiting it, but they have been totally erased. They don't exist. Not the difference between the impure Catholic, the Baroque Catholic going to Tenochtitlan and to the South American lands and the puritanical Northern Americans. It's an important difference, the difference between the Puritans destroying the past, totally erasing the past, and those strange Jesuit and Catholic priests asking themselves the strange question, are the indigenous people humans or not? And if yes, do they have a soul or not? And at the very end they decide that yes, they are humans and they have a soul. So we can exploit them to that. But sometimes we can convert them to the true faith. It's an important difference that explains, in my opinion, explains very much about present European history. The Gothic Protestant of Northern Europe and the Baroque Catholics lazy of Southern Europe. If you want to think about a possible future of Europe, you have to deal with this. And don't forget the Orthodox. The future. The future and the frontier. The American history is essentially about the frontier, the continuous deterritorialization, the continuous displacement of the frontier. This is important by a political point, by an historical point of view, but also in the self-perception of the American puritanical culture, which is essentially based on the idea that God is speaking words, totally different from the Baroque God, who is showing images. Hollywood is not in America, don't forget that. Hollywood is in California, and California is province of Naples, is Mexico, is a Baroque space. And the American modernity is the meeting point between the Protestant frontier and the Catholic Baroque imagination, the God of the images. But the future and the frontier is not forever. As we know, at a certain point of late modern history, the frontier is over. For geographical reason, for post-colonial reasons, and also for technological reasons. The very concept of frontier starts to dissolve when the technologies of perpetual deterritorialization become commonplace in the life of the postmodern generation. Step back, future. You see, in the European experience, the relation with future is not homogeneous. Think to the Italians and to the Russians. The futurist countries are the countries where future is more difficult to understand, to manage, not surprisingly, the rhetoric about future is so important in Italy, so important in Russia, where future seems to be difficult to grasp and to develop. But at the same time, Italy and Russia are the places where the understanding of the limits of future are more easy to grasp in a bad sense sometimes, because fascism and Stalinism are two different ways to imagine the future as an action of violence against the present time, against the present reality. But future and frontier, as I said, are not an eternal, are not forever. They have finished, and you asked me when, and I have the answer. Future finished in a precise moment of the year 1977. 77 is the watershed in the human history for many reasons, absolutely personal, of course, but not only so. 77 is the year when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak created the Apple trademark in a place of the Silicon Valley. 77 is the year when Charlie Chaplin died, and the kind soul of modernity dissolves. 77 is the year when, for the first time, a human being is genetically created. 77 is the year when Sid Vicious and Johnny Rotten and their friends in London sing No Future, No Future. It's the beginning of the punk perception, and punk culture is the understanding of the end. Is the understanding of the end of the future. Of course, when you say future, you have to be more precise. What future are you talking about? When punk culture spread all over the world, the neoliberal future was coming against society as a destructive force. And now I want to focus my attention on the European collapse, which is one of the facets of the end of the future, a late product of the neoliberal destruction of the future. I come to the European collapse because, in my opinion, we are living a process which is a defining process for the after-future life that we are going that we have to face. And we have to understand something more of the European collapse if we want to understand something more about our possible coming out from the present and of the future. If we want to give an answer to my question, game over, let's try to understand what is the European collapse. I would say that the European collapse is the final moment, the final act of the neoliberal destruction of the social civilization of modernity. An economist and also a member of the European Commission and also a consultant of the International Monetary Fund, an Italian called Tommaso Padoa-Schioppa, not very known because he has such a difficult name, but an important person by the point of view of the conceptualization of the post-Maastricht neoliberal transformation of Europe. Tommaso Padoa-Schioppa wrote in an interesting text the following words. Listen to me. Continental Europe needs today a thorough program of structural reform which should encompass pensions, healthcare, labor market, education, and more. This must be guided by a single principle. Listen to the single principle. Weaken the protections that in the course of the 20th century have gradually removed the individual from a direct contact with the harshness of life. This is the most clear, explicit, I would say criminal, definition of the Maastricht Treaty and after, of the neoliberal program in the world, from Argentina to everywhere. The neoliberal program is essentially this: the harshness of life has to become clear to everybody. Stop kidding. Now the real life is starting, and life is hard, you know. Maybe you forgot that because you fantasized about the possibility of having a salary, of working 8 hours per day, not more. Forget about it. Why 8 hours? 9, 10, 14. This is the harshness of life. A salary? What are you talking about? You have a debt to pay. So your salary is something that may be or may not be. This is the philosophy of the new age that we are now living in an accelerated way in the European collapse. The Italian elections, maybe you heard about it. I know that some German politicians said that in the Italian elections, 2 clowns have won. It's true. And I also know that Germans generally prefer serious leader who never joke at all. But I want to understand better what has happened in Italy recently. This has happened, that 75% of the Italian voters said no to the European Union. That's the problem. 25% have voted for a mafioso fascista called Silvio Berlusconi. 25% have voted for an interesting person, a little bit crazy, and therefore interesting, called Beppe Grillo. It's difficult to say what actually he wants, but he's saying interesting things, and 25% have not voted at all. That means that 75% of the Italian voters have said no to the European Union. That is the real signal that comes from the Italian elections. And it's a frightening signal, because Europe is the last possibility of coming out alive from the destruction. The European project is the only sensible project of a possible future, but it depends on what we mean when we say European project. You see what is happening in Spain, where all of a sudden Catalans want to be Catalans, and tomorrow Basques want to be Basques. And we know that when the Catalans want to be Catalans, it's easy. When the Basques want to be Basques, it starts to be less easy. And you see what's happening in Greece. I don't want to elaborate on that, because I am ashamed for the fact that in the last 3 years, we all of us have been totally unable to say something, to do something against the criminal destruction of the Greek society. You see what's happening. This is the destruction, the actual destruction of the European possibility. The Occupy movement has failed. That is the problem. I speak of the Occupy movement as something that belongs to the past. I'm sorry of that. And, well, I'm not sorry, because that is the truth, and we have to face the truth, and we have to invent something new. If I say game over, essentially, I say that by the point of view of the Occupy movement. Why so? What is the problem with the Occupy movement, and why we have been unable, I don't say to go to Frankfurt and to occupy the European Central Bank. I was not expecting that. I would have not gone to Frankfurt, because it was a fake idea, the idea of internationales Solidarität. It's not a problem of internationale Solidarität. It's not a problem of creating a friendly relation with the... It's a problem for the German precarious labor. What we have been unable to do is not to stand with the poor Greeks, is to understand that the future of Germany is Greece, the future of Italy is Greece, the future of Europe is Greece. This is the problem. So we have to understand what precariousness means now, because precariousness is the key word for understanding the social subjectivity of labor, but in a sense it's also a key for understanding the future, for understanding a possible future, what precariousness means. Of course, precariousness is the rupture, the break, the dissolution of a fixed relation between capital and work. It's the aleatorization, randomization of work. But this is not the core of the process of precarization. The process of precarization is the distraction, the fragilization of empathy between human beings. It's the fragilization of the bodily, of the erotic relation inside society. Precarization is in the words of Deleuze and Guattari in Mille Plateaux, a war machine in every niche. In a point of Mille Plateaux, Deleuze and Guattari say, what is fascism exactly? Difficult word, difficult concept to define. Fascism is so different. Fascism is intrinsically contradictory. It's modern and traditional. It's national and cosmopolitan. It's everything. Well, but if you want to understand what fascism is, imagine a war machine in every niche. Well, precarization is a war machine in every niche. Is the perception of the body of the other as a danger for you, for your future, for your work, for your salary, for your space, for your house. This is the real core, the deep substance of the process that is called precarization. The precarious condition is the realization of the dream of Tommaso Padoa-Schioppa, the guy who was speaking before, saying the harshness of life. Precariousness is the naked body exposed to the storms of violence, of exploitation, of war. This is precarious labor. But precarious labor is also the impossibility of a process of social recomposition. We have to start from this. We have not to be idealistic on this point. We have to understand that it's not a moral problem, solidarity. It's not even a political problem. It's something much more deep. I would say it's an erotical problem. And when it comes to eros, you cannot decide. You have to feel. You have to perceive, to be sensitive. And we are talking about the necessity, the need of a re-eroticization of the social body. This is our only possibility for the future. I don't know how it can be translated in political language. I really do not know. And this is why I say game over, because I don't have answers. I don't have imagination. I don't have words. But who am I? I'm an old person. I come from a world where precarity was such a strange thing that in the key year of my life, the year 1977, we had a big sign saying precario è bello, precarious is good, precarious is beautiful. We were fighting against regular job. We were fighting against the idea that working all the life in the same factory is good. We were fighting against the idea that going every day from my home to my factory is a good thing. We were dreaming of precarity. So let's try to imagine how precarity can become something very different from the neoliberal nightmare. But of course, this is a problem that cannot be decided at the level of politics, of moral. It has to be decided by the intimate life of social existence. So I try to go to the end of my speech that is going to last 8 minutes, 30 seconds more, trying to understand what the present composition of our life, of our social life. During the fable, the legend that we have called modernity, 3 figures, 3 characters have been fighting each other. The character of the wise man, of the intelligent, of the intellectual, if you would like, the figure of the merchant, of the money man, and the figure of the warrior. You see that these 3 characters have been using each other, not fighting, sometimes also fighting, but essentially negotiating and finding a common ground of common interest. There is a beautiful book by Robert Young titled Brighter Than Thousand Suns, which is about the Manhattan Project, about the creation of the group of scientists who created the atomic bomb in Los Alamos in the years 43, 45. And the history of the Manhattan Project is the close relation between the wise men, Einstein and Oppenheimer, with different points of view on the same subject. The capitalist, the merchant, was on the background capitalizing on the intellectual invention, and the warrior, Hitler on one side, and the Western democracy on the other side. If we don't make the bomb, Hitler will do it. And this blackmail has worked, has functioned. So you see how this relation has been, we could retrace all the history of modernity, playing with these 3 characters. But the character which is interesting to me is the general intellect, is the wise man, is the intellectual, is the intellectual potency of the human race. Because this is the main productive force of the present capitalist society, but also because this is the immanence, the possibility, the immanent possibility of freedom, of solidarity, of life, of a future, if you want. So I try to understand what's happening to the general intellect. And I see that the general intellect is kind of broken, okay? And well, first of all, the general intellect has lost his body. the general intellect is the intellectual potency of our brains facing a screen, unable to look outside the screen, unable to touch the body that is facing another screen. That is the main, not political, not moral, but erotical problem of the social recomposition of the general intellect. The general intellect has to find, to create his body anew. And in a sense, I read what has been happening during the last few years. The movement, the Occupy movement, I don't see it so much as a sort of assault against the capitalist power, the financial power. As an assault is almost ridiculous. It's funny. It's what do you want to destroy? What is power? Do you want to burn banks? Do it. It's funny, but totally useless, because power is not in the bank. The power is in the cyberspace. It's in a space that we cannot even attain, cannot even touch, except if we are able to recreate a condition of empathy and solidarity between our brains, between our intellectual abilities to assault, to attack, to fight, and most of all, to create. This is why I think that the coming movement, the coming process, is essentially to be focused on the problem of empathy between distant brains and the approachment between embodied brains. It's not a political program, I know. It's, in a sense, a question. And answering this question is a way to understand if the game is really over. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have time for a couple of questions, I would say. So I think there are microphones in the audience. So maybe if you want to ask a question, please do it now. Yeah. Do you see somebody? No questions at the moment? Ah, there is one.
It's kind of simple question, open question. How do you feel about Facebook?
Obviously, it's a question that has been answered so many times that I have to be, I should be original. I will not be so much. I have two different feelings, and it's banal. On one side, the question is not banal. My answer maybe is. On one side, I know that Facebook is a possible form of empowerment for disempowered people. Very, very, very disempowered people. You have to be very disempowered if Facebook can empower you. But that's the simple truth. At the same time, I think that Facebook is the proof of the anthropological fact that friendship is over, that we don't know anything about friendship. You know, and also a third thing I have to say about Facebook that I have been using for a lot of time. I have 4,743 friends, and but the problem also is that guess a young man in his I'm maybe 10 years old who opened his computer and thinks to be in the internet. This is the catastrophe of Facebook, that it's taking the place of the internet. And young people tend to think that the internet is blue, with that kind of, with 4 questions about who are you, and so on and so on. This is the real danger of Facebook. The uniformation, the reduction of this great possibility which is the net. Then I tell you shortly something that a friend, an Egyptian friend, told me some months ago. Everybody has been talking about the importance of Facebook and Twitter and the internet in general in the Egyptian revolution. He told me, yes, of course, the television has been more important than the internet, but also the internet has played this role. But you know when the Egyptian revolution actually explodes? In the morning of January 28. What happened in the night between 27 and 28? Mubarak has the brilliant idea of shutting down the internet. The morning after, people open their screen, have no more friends, so go to the streets to find friends.
So I would say one more question. Yeah, there is one, yeah? Yeah, please.
I would like to ask, because we were talking about games and winning and losing, so the idea of a game over, and I was wondering if we could think about the idea of infinite games or open-ended games. I'm here talking about games such as The Sims, Minecraft, and World of Warcraft, which is kind of a Facebook with swords, in which actually you put these disembodied brains into a sort of relation in which they do not win, but they achieve. They are constantly gaining little victories. Now you can kill the bigger animal, or now you can create a bigger house. But the fact that always escapes us is that what defines these games is that the machine is outside of it. The machine actually turns the game into the fabric of reality, or a reality that we choose to enter. And I wonder then, is emancipation in that sense to give machine a proper body, to force it to enter this game, to teach the machine that it too can be precarious? And how would you envision this?
Well, first of all, I have to say that my experience of the video games is an old one. It dates to 79, 81. So I never entered Second Life, just to say something. I tried, but it's too difficult. But your question is interesting because you are opening different questions. One is, and this I am already conscious of that, is the idea that the machine always wins. The first generation of video games, which was in a sense the the passage to the new world of the game machine was teaching you a lesson. You are the loser. Forget about it. And I give special importance to that moment. I mean, 77, 82, 83, because it's the punk period, but it's also the age of the new wave, of that kind of technophile, technophobe culture, which will become the cyber culture and the cyberpunk culture of the following years. So in those years, you have to learn that you will always lose, but at the same time, some cultural awareness starts to be created. Then you go fast towards the recent evolution of the game machine, and in this space, I don't know so much about violence, and I don't fear I don't think that the real danger is in the apprenticeship to violence. It's not this my problem. My main problem is the disembodiment of the relation and of language and of communication and so on. An American anthropologist called Rose Goldson writes in the year 75 the following words: we are breeding a new generation that will learn more words from a machine than from the mother. This sentence, in my opinion, is defining the present, the process of precarization. Because the process of precarization is essentially about the fragilization of language, the fragilization of the relation between signifier and signified. How can I trust the signifier water if it's a machine that tells me that it means, it's my mother who told me aqua, so I know that what aqua means. Then you say a sort of education to precarization which enters inside the very relation man-machine. That's interesting, but certainly the process of precarization is starting from this relation with the machine, and maybe we can use the machine in order to empower our precarity and transform it in a force, in a solidarity, in a form. I don't know how. I don't know because I am an ignorant, because I really need to say, for me, the game is over.